Thank you for joining me today. One of the things around leadership and why I've decided to start this series of podcasting is leadership's quite a critical issue across the landscape in terms of industry, whether you're private or public sector. And there's a lot to be said for the research that's happening and the almost endless supply of leadership courses that you can do. What I want to add to that mix that will hopefully help people understand what leadership means and understand other people's stories is to actually talk to people one-on-one. And so for the inaugural podcast, I'd like to welcome a good friend of mine and someone from the seafood industry who is the Executive Director of Seafood Industry Victoria, Mr. Johnathon Davey. How are you, Jono?
I'm good, Eric, yourself, and thank you for having me. How exciting it is to be a part of the inaugural podcast of this series. I'm pumped to be here. Let's get into it.
Okay, mate. Thanks for that. Look, just in terms of some context, can you give us a bit of a background to how you got to the lofty role of Executive Director?
Yeah, look, and I must admit, I probably see it as I feel as though I almost took a short road to get here. So, well, when I say short, I don't mean in terms of years, but in terms of positions and sort of how I've come into this role, I'd see it as rather short. So my background is I've done a Bachelor of Marine Biology and Aquaculture at James Cook Uni. I then worked out that marine biology, while it seems to be a pretty sexy job, and aquaculture as what it is now in terms of a growing industry, there wasn't a lot of opportunities back when I finished. And so I then decided I was going to invest in doing some further research, which ended up looking at doing a master's degree in living marine resources down at the Australian Maritime College in Tassie. And from there, I then went on to working for a couple of years importing live ornamental fish, which, while it was within aquaculture, wasn't really in the ocean. It wasn't really where I saw my future going. So I then left there and went and joined the Commonwealth Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry. It was called then. It's now just Department of Agriculture and Water Resources maybe. And then after 6 years of doing that, I was doing international fisheries negotiations for the federal government. I then decided it was time for a bit of a change, and I applied for the role here in Victoria to come home to Victoria and to get involved in what is a really amazing industry. And I guess I feel privileged to be in the position I am in, and the people that I work with every day, being able to represent people, but also to feel as though you're having some sort of impact and change in what their daily, I guess, experience is quite rewarding. And so I've been doing this now for over 5 years. Love it. And I guess I see the whole industry leadership thing. I feel I've evolved in the way that I do that over the last 5 years, which I hope we get into talking about in today's podcast.
Okay, so just point of clarification then. So when you were with the Commonwealth doing the trade negotiations, was that a leadership position as such?
No, it wasn't. Well, so let's rephrase it. Yes, it was, in the fact that while I wasn't the head honcho, I was the one engaging with industry and with the department the department heads as to what was Australia's position going forward. So,
oh, wow. So more, would I be right in saying that's a more informal leadership position?
Well, it was interesting in the government. You had to become very good at managing up as opposed to managing down. So it was a different form of leadership.
Kind of like managing a board?
Well, no, I don't think so. I'd say it would be... It's an experience that if you've never done it, you'll never actually understand what it is.
Yep.
But in terms of, I guess, when you look at the public service, the level that I was at, I had 4 or 5 managers above me in terms of the hierarchy, but then obviously you've then got the minister sitting above that. So you may well be successful in managing up to the people within the department, but as soon as it gets to the minister, there's still nothing to say that what you've put forward is what they're going to approve and what they're going to go with.
Oh, okay.
So,
yep.
Yeah, it's a different journey. That's probably the best way to put it.
Sure. So am I right in asking then your first leadership role was with Seafood Industry Victoria?
Yeah, I think that's probably about spot on.
Okay, excellent. So you've alluded to why you like working in the industry, but can I ask you what drew you to the role in Civ?
Ultimately, I'd say it was I felt like I had a leadership role while I was in Canberra in terms of giving the industry a voice into government. When there are a couple of things that would have been good for Australia and industry and the government that went up the chain in terms of a few policy positions that I drafted, came back with no, we can't support that as government. That was the signal for me of, okay, it's time for something different. And I'd grown some fairly strong relationships with industry, and the fact to get out and actually represent industry in I guess not giving them inside information about what happens within government, but knowing how the supply channels work into government, I figured was something that I brought to the industry that would be of benefit for them and for me. And so, I love working for industry. I don't know how I could ever go back or think about being in government again. Just knowing what I do now and knowing how industry operates, it's so powerful and it's so impressive that I don't want to work anywhere else.
Okay, yeah, that's coming through pretty loud and clear. So let me ask you something. In your experience, having now worked, as you say, in the government sphere and now in an advocacy role with industry, do you think is there a difference between leadership and management in your experience?
Oh, good question.
Mate, that don't pay me the big bucks for nothing.
Yes, I think there is. Because I honestly believe you can be a good leader without being a good manager. I don't know whether you can be a good manager without being a good leader.
Okay, that's an excellent response. So can you unpack that a little bit?
I'm just trying to. So I guess management has a number of different elements to it, and it doesn't necessarily mean bringing people together. You can go away and manage a project without leading anyone. Whereas in the leadership front, if you don't have people who are sharing the same vision and I guess working with you, then I think you struggle to be a leader.
Okay, yep.
Whereas you can be a good leader and have people working with you and have strong management skills as well with those people underneath you. But I just don't think you can be, tell me if I'm missing answering the question and be honest with me. But I think they're two separate things.
Yeah, sure. Look, from the and this is always up for debate, but there's always that tension between is the leadership function around visioning and planning for the future and the big ticket, the meta-analysis of what's going on in your environment versus management, which can sort of straddle two things, the day-to-day running and operational side of an organization or a business versus moving into that role about trying to take people with you. So, no, look, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. It's just the literature always talks about the differences between the two. And so if that's your experience of it, that's your experience of it. I don't think there's a right or wrong here. So, yeah, look, that's a great response. So that kind of leads into the next question. So, again, this is, based on your experience. Leaders sometimes make mistakes when they're doing their thing, when they're engaging in work. How do you engage with a potential error or mistake that's attributed to you? So I'm focusing on you as a leader when there's something that's gone wrong. How do you own that mistake? What process goes through your mind about? I'm not talking about a catastrophic error, but something that you've gone, shit, this isn't right. I've got to make this right. How do you go about engaging with that? What's the thought process?
Yeah, look, the first thing you need to do is actually own up and accept it. As opposed to trying to backtrack and cover your own ass. The best bit is to just come out and say, yeah, okay, probably didn't do this the way that we should have, but you always have to learn off what you do. So if you make a mistake and then don't compute to the point where you're actually developing and learning what you're getting out of making a mistake, then you've completely missed the point.
Great. Yeah.
And I kind of look for examples of where I've done it. And I would say all of us have done it in some area around social media, where you can think you're putting something up as a post in all positive nature, but someone will turn around and go, do you realize what that actually means? And so it now makes your leadership space in that social media area so much more time consuming, where you run all the different scenarios through your head before pressing post. Whereas as a young up and coming leader and not having played in that space before, you're more than happy to push post whenever you think you're ready to go.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's a very good example of that. So the reason behind that question, and this is something that threw me when I was so I did the this is for the sake of completeness here. I know you did as well. I underwent the National Seafood Industry Leadership Program some 8 years ago. That's offered through our industry, and one of the questions at the start of that program was just a sort of generic, well, what are the elements of a leader? And I brought up the fact that you have to be able to own your mistakes as a leader. And I got a deathly silence when I made that response. So do you think some leaders, again, in your travels, find it difficult to own mistakes or errors of judgment?
Yeah, but I guess I look at you in your role at QSIA and me in my role at Seafood Industry Victoria, and we don't really have many other people who operate in our organisations who can make mistakes.
Okay, sure.
We don't. Excuse me. We operating such a small organisation, a small association. You've got to be able to own up and take the responsibility for what you do. And if you don't do that, you will lose the followers who are behind you very bloody quickly.
Yep.
And I think you're right. You're absolutely spot on. Being able to own up and say, whether it's a mistake or not, yes, I could have done things better. and then working out how you develop yourself to do things better in the future is how you lead effectively.
Excellent. No, that's great. So that leads to the next question, Jono, and this one I think is an offshoot of definitely the being able to own what you do. Is what's the most difficult part of being a leader in your experience?
So I'll go back to you mentioned the National Seafood Industry Leadership Program just before. So I did it 4 years ago.
Okay. Yep.
And I think the main thing that I learned out of that program was that you can be a leader without being the front man every time. And that's one of the key things that I learned out of that program. So I'd been almost 10 months in this role at Seafood Industry Victoria when I did the leadership program, and every single day through being in the media, through dealing with industry, there was an expectation that I was the go-to person and the front line on everything. Knowing that, and then going into that leadership program, I have no doubt that some people were sitting there going, "Who is this guy? What does he think he is? Why is he taking this approach?" And that to me, at the end of the first day, I was sitting there going, "What am I doing here? What am I getting out of this program?" And it made me think overnight that I needed to take a slightly different approach, and that was to actually sit back and shut up and listen, and to work out that there are other people who say and have great ideas and great initiative, and I can be a leader through supporting and promoting that as opposed to doing my own stuff.
Yeah, sure.
And so that I think is one element that people tend to overlook in being a leader, is that you don't have to be on the front foot and doing everything all the time, but you need to promote and support and recognize others on their leadership journey as well.
Oh, excellent. Okay, that's great. So, and I guess I'll throw this one in the mix. How do you measure success? So, okay, I know it's a difficult question, but you talked about trying to identify potential in others and that you don't have to be the front person all the time. So I get that in the context of doing the daily thing that is being a leader, particularly in organisation like ours, advocacy roles. And success can be a loaded word. So I'll give you a few seconds, but why I ask this is that leaders are often held to a standard, whatever that standard is. There's key performance indicators, probably not so applicable in our industry because of the nature of what we do. But I'm interested to hear your feedback on this, and so will others that work in the not-for-profit sector, because we're not necessarily pinged to a number in terms of a KPI. So what's your evaluation of that?
Look, to be honest, I don't know how to answer that.
Okay, that's okay. It's okay.
And just being open and honest about it. So I would say a KPI would be, so I kind of, the way that my board and I work is not that there are specific KPIs. There are management arrangements. There are other bits and pieces that need to be done that we work towards. And we've got obviously our 5-year strategic framework that we're working towards. So for me, making sure that everything I do is implementing and driving that is how I see success. Well, I don't know. I don't know whether anyone has got it right as to how to measure that, because it's not around dollars although you have to have financial security in what you're doing. But that doesn't necessarily mean growth. It means you've got the ability to turn up and down what you are delivering at any time to meet what you can do financially. For organisations like ours, you'd say that a measurable is increasing your membership base. Well, that'd be lovely, except we've got government decisions that are removing our membership base. So while our membership base is growing, it's reducing at the same time. So I struggle to measure that as success or failure. It's a really loaded question, and I don't know that I can answer it fully.
No, that's okay. And just for the record, this is the first time I've been able to ask you a question that has thrown you for a six. And look, there is, again, with the discussion around what is leadership, there is no right and wrong answer. From someone looking outside in, looking at what's happening in Victoria, and you use social media before, so I use that as an example. You guys are very much on the front foot when it comes to delivering messages around what's happening in Victorian seafood, whether it's on the promotion side or whether it's talking about current events, of which there are plenty to talk about in Victoria like everywhere else. So success can be a loaded thing, and the fact that you've responded the way you've responded suggests to me that there is no magic response to this, because it'll be different for each industry that you might participate in. I'm in the same, no pun intended, boat that you're in Queensland. So, yeah, just anyway, we'll move on from that one. Can I get your thoughts on two statements here? On-the-job experience develops better leaders. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes and no.
Okay.
And I say that because I'm going to say that when I took on this role, I was thrown in the deep end, where I took it on 3 months out from the government going into caretaker mode, where I have no doubt that decisions had already been made around closing down one of our Victorian fisheries. So I had no formal media training. I had no real understanding on what and how you operate in the social media space as a business or as an industry. If I had some training on those elements, I probably would have been more effective and more ready to go in the role that I had taken on. But timing didn't allow that. So learning on the job, actually, I'm going to say I benefited from it a lot. Others probably don't. So I don't know that there's a right or wrong way to answer that.
Okay. And again, not looking for that. So that's great. Next statement: formal education helps you to be a better leader.
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think so. I know I have formal qualifications. Do I use them in my day-to-day work as an industry leader in the seafood industry? To an extent. Would I be able to do the job without them? It would depend on experience and exposure.
Okay. Yep. So experience is the key there then?
Oh, look, I think experience, exposure, and passion. If you don't have passion and you don't have drive, then where and how are the industry meant to feed off that? And sort of, I get criticised quite regularly about the fact that I continue to go out and talk positively about Victorian seafood, the need to grow it, the need to have more and more respect for industry, but also a growth plan for industry, where people at the moment only see reduction. So if I didn't have that passion and I didn't have the drive, then I wouldn't have anything. And so I think there's more to be said of those than formal qualifications.
Excellent. Okay. So this is going back to yourself as a leader. What do you think are the most critical capabilities of leaders into the future? So let's imagine you've got the ability to bring up some leaders through your organisation, and looking out, I don't know, to 2030, say something like that. What do you think the future is going to demand of leaders in our industry, as an example?
I would honestly say we're going to need more. So from a seafood industry's perspective, I would say, while it's great to have people like ourselves in executive roles, without having leaders across our states and in different sectors, then it will become a lot harder. So at the moment, one of our goals at Seafood Industry Victoria and our new strategy is to identify young up-and-comers in terms of potential future leaders, and making sure that we're giving them the appropriate skills and confidence that they need to take their leadership journey forward. If we don't succession plan, then we're an ever-aging industry. We need to be thinking about who are the next cohort coming through.
Okay. Yep.
And
Yep.
as I said, we need more of them. So if I've got someone who has media skills, some leadership training, is on and understands social media in each port across Victoria, then I will have enough contacts that I can make things happen pretty quickly. Without that, and it all falling on me, there's time constraints, but also you can't be in 3 places at once. So having the ability to spread your knowledge, but also having other people who are on the same journey, is really important.
Okay, so we're almost at the end here, but this is one that, and I'm not asking this to throw you. This is one you can answer this 100 different ways. But what are your views on the following statement, sir? Leaders are born, not made. So before you answer, maybe this might help, that you've dealt with a lot of different people in our industry, in your state and across other states, and you might have seen people that are what you might perceive as born leaders versus those that have come up through the ranks and have got through experience to where they've got to in certain positions, and that might be, like you said, in executive roles or on boards. From all that knowledge that you've got in your background, is it really that you've got to get there through a mix of experiences and education, or is it that just some people are naturally gifted leaders?
Look, I don't really know how to answer that one, but I think if you, and as I said, we're going through this process at the moment. If you expose people to the right situation, the right environment, and gear them up with the right skills, everyone has the ability to be a leader. They don't have to be sitting in an executive role to be a leader. You can be a volunteer communications person in your local community. In terms of an industry conduit, you are a leader.
Yeah.
And so I don't know that there's a right or wrong way to say you're born with it or you learn it. I think, as I said, everyone has the ability to be a leader. whether it doesn't matter whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, or you have the ability to get in front of a media camera or not, you can be a leader. And
Yep.
there's that many ways of being a leader. I've got at the moment a group of license holders who I guess are a non-formal, almost subcommittee that I'm working with, who have not been in leadership roles before, don't see themselves in leadership roles, but they're open to coming to the table and working on what is best for industry. And so I see them as a leadership group. They probably don't, but I do. And so, just having the drive to put your hand up and give something a go can make you a leader without even realising it.
Okay, great. All right, Jono, look, this is the last question, and this one is particularly about...
that was the last question.
No, I said the last couple of questions. So here comes the final question, and this one is definitely about yourself. So if you had the chance to talk to a younger Johnathon, say 10 years ago, what would you say to him about what is being an effective leader?
Because
you've alluded to it before. You said that having passion and drive for something is important, and being willing to give something a go is important. But I think the key message that I would say is make sure you listen. If you don't listen and you try to do all the talking at every opportunity, then you'll quite quickly find yourself not just out of favour, but you'll find people disengaging. So being an effective leader, you have to be able to listen. You have to be able to compute what you are hearing and make sure that you don't have to take sides. You don't have to have one solid position, but being able to effectively understand and recognise everyone's positions and point of view, that is crucial. Yep. No, that's great. Johnathon, I appreciate your time. I know you're busy, and can I thank you for sharing your views on what is, look, it's not a topic that's often discussed or people want to have a discussion about, but yet we spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to try and get good leadership and develop good leaders. And so if this helps someone down the track, listening to what you've just talked about from your industry perspective, and it's only one perspective, I understand that we don't have the answers to everything. It's always better for me, I think, as a human being trying to learn something, is to talk to somebody else rather than have it written down and not have the same impact. So, mate, can I thank you for your time?
I appreciate it. I respect what you're doing and the direction you're trying to do in terms of give people taking us all on a leadership journey, Eric, in terms of sharing knowledge and providing, I guess, wealth for people who want to assume a leadership position or look at opportunities into the future. And more than happy if you want to share my details with people if they get in contact and want to have a further chat. More than happy to have a discussion.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you for that. I was going to ask that, so you've beat me to the punch, mate. Thanks again, and thanks everyone for listening to what was the start of hopefully a long conversation with leaders from across the spectrum. So thanks everyone, and I'll catch you on the next podcast. And thanks again, Johnathon.
Not a problem. Appreciate it.